rigging and unfair competition.
Webcam microphone up close. Webcam microphone up close.
At the age of 19 in 1962, she was a...
See, but I have the files. I read this stuff at the National Archives, and I read these other things. I said to myself, how can that be possible? The brain, fondle slab of choice, computers, internet, professional wrestlers, and not just Ventura style. It doesn't matter whether it's cartoon comes from, as long as it's real. It doesn't take hard to get real information. Because seriously, they don't want you to have just read two sources together whenever I try to prove out one of these. It's not. If you expect your government to tell you the truth, you're going to sadly disappoint another one of these things.
Dear Lord, what a dirty, dirty old man, huh?
Really? Can't be serious. Is this really how you want things to be? Come on. More hooker, eruptions, eruptions, whatever.
Like Dave Powers kind of...
Really?
Allegedly broadcast live from FEMA Region 2, within the borders of the formerly united and currently occupied states of America. We bring you the Ochelli Effect.
I damn sure know I'm an original.
We have all these situations. I'd love to know why it takes 50 years, for a 19-year-old girl to eventually get up to gumption to put these things out.
And good Thursday evening on UCY.TV radio. This is the Ochelli Effect. I am your host, Chuck Ochelli. Just like that horribly rough sort of a bumper tells you already. Anyhow, having a couple of technical issues with bringing on Gayle Nix Jackson, but I will get her on here very, very shortly. Let's see if things will get out of my way. And we're going to discuss... Thank you. We're going to discuss the Nix film, actually. So, that is, by the way, the film that people ask me about a lot of times of the JFK assassination, which is filmed from exactly the opposite side of the street from where the Zapruder film is. Let's see now. Let's see. Gayle, I'm on the air, and I think I can hear you. Hello? Perhaps Gayle cannot hear me. Hello? Okay, not quite sure why she can't hear me, but as I was saying, from the opposite side of the street, from where generally people see the Zapruder film, was a couple of films taken, actually, but one of the best known and the most complete would be the Nix film, and this is the one that people do ask me about quite often. For some reason, Gayle can't hear me still. That's funny, because before I couldn't hear her. Don't know why this is happening. But live radio, folks, what can I say? Gayle, can you hear me? All right. I'm going to try something else. Oh, there you are again. Okay. I don't think she is listening to her speaker somehow or other. Maybe has a headset in. Let's see. I'm just going to type this to you. You and can hear you. You're not hearing me. Okay. Again, folks, sorry, but... technical issues. Good thing I have 2 hours to work with. because, as I said, I do want to discuss the Nix film and everything that's gone on. I mean, I have my own viewpoints on it, but Gayle is actually the granddaughter of Orville Nix, who is the guy who took that film. Like I said, that's that one that's on the opposite side of the street. There's another one that's similar to it that some people do often confuse with the Nix film, which is the Muchmore film, which was taken by Marie Muchmore from the opposite side of Elm Street, again, as the Zapruder film. This is what you know of it. However, the truth of the matter is that the Nix film actually begins on... Well, you know what? Let me paint the whole picture. The trip from Love Field to the final destination, which wound up being Parkland Hospital instead of the Trade Mart there in Dallas. For one reason or another, there was a twist and a turn there in the motorcade route, which took the motorcade from Main Street to make a right onto Houston Street, and then a left onto Elm Street, where the shots were actually fired. Now, the Nix film begins with some of the motorcade actually coming onto Houston prior to turning onto Elm Street. And can you hear me now, Gayle?
I can. Can you hear me?
There we go. Okay.
Wrong button. Oh my God, I'm technologically challenged.
It's all right. I was trying to explain to people that beforehand I was trying to test things with you, and you could hear me, but I couldn't hear you. And now the funny part was I was hearing all of your noise, but you were not hearing me. So I was just trying to explain that, and I was just setting up for people.
Yay.
From a verbal standpoint, anyway, I'm often asked about the other film, and the reason why I'm asked about this is because most people identify the Zapruder film as the seminal sort of photography from that day in Dealey Plaza, and they don't necessarily forget about the Nix film, but they never identify it properly. So I'm often asked about, well, what about the film from the other side of the street? Now, there are two films that could be said to depict from the other side of the street that are really accessible, as I said at the beginning, and that's the Muchmore film and the Nix film. There's also the Bell film, which was shot so badly that you have to enhance it in order to understand anything that's going on in it, which is a whole other case, and that one is actually shot from a similar angle as well. But the Nix film, which is also often used for the footage on Houston Street, as I was explaining, because the motorcade actually turned from Main Street onto Houston, and then took a right onto Houston, and then took a left onto Elm, where the shots were fired. Actually, this film begins over there. At least that's where I've always seen it beginning from. This film was taken by your grandfather, correct?
Exactly. And that is where it started. That's how you started it, just as you described.
Right, and now, interesting stuff, I've actually done a little bit of a study on the Nix film, which is something that has been ignored by a lot of researchers, and it's strange. They will make references to it, they'll use images from it, but they really don't study the film. They don't take a great deal of time to look at it, how it was actually made, the man who actually did it. You see strange things being said occasionally about Orville Nix, believe it or not, and I'm going to get to that later on in the show, because I want to correct some of that stuff, first of all. But no problem. And you and I have actually never had a conversation before today, so...
Never. And I don't mean to step on I just am agreeing with you, wishing I could pat you on the back.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. But, I am just after the facts of the situation. And when it comes to even understanding the photographic evidence that exists in the case, which I spent a very long time working on, there is a whole history to each one of these particular pieces. And, of course, the Nix film, to me, is one of the really more astonishing pieces of historical evidence. But like I said, it begins there, and that footage is often used from the Nix film specifically to show the motorcade on Houston, and then, of course, the shots that are fired on Elm, and we do actually get to see, because there was only 3 films that actually captured the moment of the headshot, and that, again, is the Zapruder film, which everybody knows, the well, actually, no. If we think about it carefully, there's 4 of them. But again, the Bell film is terrible, almost impossible to discern what's going on. But it does actually capture the moment of the headshot. But the Nix film and the Muchmore film. The Muchmore film is of a lower quality than the Nix film. It's much more choppy. But it kind of comes into the Nix film story as well, because at one point the same media company wound up owning these films, the originals ostensibly,
Right.
And this is part of what you've been about for quite a while. Now, I didn't realize that you were interested in finding out where this film went, and all of that as far back as 1988. Now, I became aware of it in the 90s that the original was missing. But of course, your grandfather was complaining about tampering with the film in the 60s.
Yes, but he didn't know. He didn't use the word tampering, Chuck. He just said it looked different, and he was not the photo expert, and God knows I'm not either. That other people are. He just said it. Here's the things he told us: darker, jumpier, and look different. Those are the things he said about the film. And I would say, well, Papa, what is different? I don't know. It just doesn't look the same. And as the horrible, petulant teenager, preteen I was when we would have these discussions before he died, I said, Papa, are you sure? Because, I mean, you really only watched it on the Dynacolor Film Lab all those times. And he said, no, I saw it many more times at UPI, which is where I really had noticed that it was different. Well, between that time, Dynacolor and UPI is when the FBI had it. And I don't know, Chuck. I don't know if it's been tampered with. I don't know. I don't know. And I don't think that we're going to know unless we find the original, you know?
Well, that's exactly right. And let's start from the beginning, though, for the listener, because, you and I understand these things, and we know the intricacies involved here, and of course, at some point, we can get into the whole possibility as to whether somebody might have actually died, having been in possession of a key and all this other stuff in a safety deposit box, which was one of the stories that was circulated for a while and all that. But let's first explain who Orville Nix was. How about that? Because for my 2 cents, the guy has never been fairly accounted for. People have gone into great detail about Abraham Zapruder and his family and all of that kind of stuff. Let's just talk about who Orville Nix was first of all.
Okay, he obviously was my grandfather, who I loved dearly. He had an only son, which is my dad, who lives with us, by the way. Still, he's alive and he lives with us. But my dad was never really interested. I don't know if it's the generational thing where, the rebellious generational thing. He was not as interested in all the JFK assassination stuff as I was as a little kid. But then again, my grandfather was always, you know how grandparents do. Oh, you're such a wonderful grandchild and this, that, and the other. So I would listen intently to everything he had to say. But, excuse me, my grandfather was an air conditioning maintenance man with the General Services Administration. And he started downtown at the building where the Secret Service, where they were housed, like all the governmental buildings were right there together. And that's where he met Forrest Sorrells, who was the head of the FBI. I'm sorry, of the Secret Service. Why did I say FBI? Head of the Secret Service here in Dallas. And they would go to the River Lakes Country Club, and they played golf together, and they'd play poker together, but they didn't really ever talk much about business. It was just a friendship. And on the day that President Kennedy was coming to town, Forrest knew that my grandfather wanted to take my sister and my brother and myself down to see the president, because, it wasn't that often that a president came to Dallas or was in a parade. And he told him where to stand that day. He told him that he would get some really good pictures if he stood at Maine and Houston. So that's where he was. But he worked, like I said, for the General Services Administration. And to promote him, he had to have a high school diploma. So the people with General Services sent him to SMU to get his high school diploma. and then he got a promotion, and before the assassination, he transferred to the Terminal Annex building. Now, that's the building where Harry Holmes was. That's the building where his boss was J.C. Price, who was on top of the roof watching the parade and said that he saw people running. Do you remember all those things, Chuck?
Oh, absolutely. And as a matter of fact, you can see Orville Nix and also J.C. Price both in Mark Lane's movie Rush to Judgment. And J.C. Price is the guy who's sitting on top of a building explaining what he saw from the Terminal Annex building, and is one of the guys wearing a hat. Right. Now, this is one of the, and also was sort of reimagined in the movie JFK as well. And also, where Orville Nix was standing was also kind of shown in that movie briefly in sort of a flash sort of sequence as well. And what people need to understand is, he's standing at the corner of Maine and Houston, and the only reason why he ends up capturing Elm is because he walks across and turns the camera over to Elm Street, pretty much where, the president is going to disappear onto the Stemmons Freeway. So it's really happenstance that he even captured the assassination events as it was, because he turned, and in fact, didn't even get a chance to really reorient the camera too well, because when you look at what is the closest thing to the original that I've ever seen of the Nix film, okay, and I do hold up my fingers in air quotes here, because I contend that the Nix film is not available in whole at this point in time. But the closest thing that I've seen to the original, the car even appears to be going uphill because of the way your grandfather was standing with the camera.
He wasn't standing. My grandfather was 6'6", so he was kind of running. Well, okay, I don't know your height or anything, but I'm 5'8". I would have been running, but he was walking really quickly. And I'll be honest with you, Chuck, he did not even realize he was taking pictures. All he heard were the shots. He saw people falling all around him. He heard people screaming. I mean, it was like a melee. And that's why it took a week before he even realized he had assassination footage. He didn't want to waste his film. He was going to use it all up,
Well, right, because after all, and let's talk about that too, because he wasn't exactly like he used his home movie camera, like a lot of people did at that point in time, just to take sort of small clips of moving images. I mean, you really didn't get a lot out of your film at that point in time. It's not like later on when we had VHS tapes that you could turn into 4-hour features and things like this. You were getting like 20 minutes out of these things when you were lucky. I think the type of camera that he had actually gave him like 25 minutes each way.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It is a Keystone with a grip. So, I mean, he is white-knuckling and holding on to that grip more so out of fear and what's going on around him than of taking the pictures, which is another reason, I think, why you see it looks like the motorcade is going uphill. I mean, the way that he's holding it and running, and he's so tall, to anybody else, that would have been the ground. We'd have been looking at the ground the whole time. But because he was so tall, where he's holding it and the auto zoom is on, we get the whole assassination footage,
Well, right, and that's the other thing. Now, another thing is, again, your grandfather wasn't exactly a film expert or anything like that. We've been over the years, and again, because the original has not been available, it has been surmised that he was actually using the wrong kind of film to actually be taking this kind of footage, because some of it's kind of dark and all this other stuff. But I say again that we don't know that until we can see what the markings were on the film and understand the process by which it was done.
Exactly, Chuck. Golly, Chuck. Exactly. And I want to say something else here. When I spoke with Moses Weitzman, who worked at FX and is most well known for working on the Zapruder film, and that's where Robert Groden worked. And
this is exactly where, and just to give everybody a little history real quick, this is where Groden gets a hold of his copy to begin with. This is exactly the copy that was first shown to the American people on Good Night America. It actually came from Weitzman. That was his copy that he had, which was a mechanic's copy essentially, because he had done the work for Life magazine. Right. Okay.
But Mr. Mo told me, he said, Gayle, if in fact your grandfather was using indoor film, as they say, he said it should have given more light because indoor film is made to exude more light through the filter or through the lens or whatever. I'm no expert. He said than outdoor.
Well, see, but that's exactly the point. Is that, and this is why I've never bought that contention anyway. Again, not a film expert, but I'm just saying from a common sense sort of point of view, you would figure that indoor film would be a little more light sensitive so as to capture more of an image when you have lower light, because you're going to assume that in the sunlight you're going to be overmatched with light, if anything. So the dark effect on that film, as far as I'm concerned, is still an enigma yet unanswered. Because, again, what could he have possibly been using that would have darkened, it wasn't exactly the brightest of sunny days, but at the point at which he was filming, the light content out there, if you look at the Hughes film, if you look at just about any of the other films, you have an oversaturation of light in the effect of the film anyway.
Right.
Except in the copies we have of the Nix film, which is very, very weird. Of course, the Much More film is extremely jumpy, and I always find that one difficult to watch anyway.
Right.
And it is the one that's most similar to the Nix film, by the way.
People get them confused sometimes.
Right, and that's but it's funny to me because a lot of people still don't even identify it. They just think it's the other film. There was actually many films taken in Dealey Plaza that day, but again, like I said, only 3 of them realistically caught a good glimpse at the headshot. 4 of them actually captured it, but like I said, the Bell film. Have you viewed the Bell film?
I have.
Yeah, it's almost unwatchable because of the way he shot it,
right.
Which is not an unreasonable thing to happen. There was a lot of films that were taken in the 50s and 60s with these home movie cameras where people cut off. You've seen other people's home movies. I mean, maybe I'm a little old here, so I'm gonna go.
Well, I was in those home movies. I guess you were too.
I was in a couple of them, and people's heads were cut off, and the birthday cake wasn't there, or the kid who was supposed to be there wasn't there because you were orienting this with usually a viewfinder that had wasn't lit. It was just sort of a plastic square or something, and so there was lots of stuff like that, right?
Yeah, it's funny. That's funny. Because a lot of the films that my grandfather did take, he would stand out in the front yard and he'd see a jet flying over and he would film it. I mean, those are the kind you would look at his films and there's film upon film upon film of him taking pictures of jets. And you're like, okay, why would anybody do that? But if you take into consideration, and Chuck, okay, I don't mean to be philosophical, but I do believe a lot of the times people forget the history. They forget in the 60s, these people had been through a depression. Many had been through World War II. My grandfather wasn't one of those. They knew what it was like for this new technology like jets, like moon landings, like cameras, Keystone cameras with a grip. I mean, that was cool. That was like, for us, these circular 4D TVs now, or like last year, what was it? 3D, and now this year it's 4D, and they're circular. That was their 4D TVs. What was this type of thing?
Well, right, and although your grandfather, and I'm going to identify your grandfather as really just a regular sort of blue collar guy for the most part. Yeah. That's what I understand about him. Of course, I didn't know him like you did, but it just seems to me as though this was a regular blue collar guy who was probably pretty happy to get his newer piece of technology, right. And that's what it was. It was kind of a rare thing to have one of these higher quality video cameras of sort. I mean, and it's not even a video camera; it's a film camera. Excuse me. Right. But
and you had a wife that was griping at him about spending the money on these cameras and film and. When she had things that she wanted to buy for the grandkids. Oh, yeah. I mean, that's another reason why he used every bit of film. He wasn't going to have her yelling at him about wasting the film.
Oh, yeah, and the film wasn't cheap, and the process to get it done wasn't cheap, and that's the other thing. You had to actually, buy the film, load it correctly, because God help you if you screwed it up loading it. And then, of course, you had to take it and go get it processed, and then after it was...
Here's another, God forbid, Chuck, if you left the lens cover on. And he had done that before, too, and oh, my grandmother really gave him heck about that.
Yeah, because then you have a totally wasted nothing, because it's just black.
They paid for the film and to get it processed to see nothing. Yeah. She really gave him heck about that. I remember that. I remember as a kid that. Orville, you don't know what you're doing with that camera. So, there was a lot. I guess bottom line, when I think about my grandfather, he was so excited. He was a good Democrat. He was a Kennedy man. My dad was going to vote for Barry Goldwater and was trying to convince my grandfather that was the way to go. But no, my grandfather was a good, he liked the Kennedys, and he was down there to not just appreciate our president, but to share history with his grandkids and his wife and all. And I know he was there for a reason, Chuck. I know it. In fact, everyone that was there for a reason. So many of them have passed on, and we can't talk to them now. But wouldn't it be nice if we could? Because all these commissions that we paid for all these years and committees, they didn't do it. So.
Well, see, and that is the point here. Now, we'll get into the history of the film for sure, but I did want to make sure that we sort of addressed, the common sort of elements to this guy, because I see stuff said, and I hope I don't upset you with this, but let's just get down to it, because I don't appreciate it where people, because I can find a conspiracy in a lot of things, but when people start tying people like your grandfather to some sort of conspiratorial activity, it irritates the crap out of me, because I happen to know that the guy, and I'm going to say this, that the guy was just there because exactly what you said. He just wanted to preserve a piece of history that he could share with his family. This film camera that he had, this was just one of these things that was, an enjoyment of his. Like you said, he was sitting there filming, jet planes when they went over his head and stuff like that, because he thought it was remarkable. And he wanted to film things that were remarkable. And a lot of it was, like you said, the home movies of the children, the grandchildren. Well, actually, the one child, I should say, and yourself, and whatever. But that was the thing. It wasn't like he was there. Although he did know Forrest Sorrells and all of that kind of stuff, and people have said to me over the years that, well, he was there in order so he could capture this. But a lot of people don't realize, like you said also, he didn't even realize that he had the assassination on film at first.
He didn't. He went the next morning. Mm-hmm. Excuse me. He went the next morning and showed my grandmother. Oh, wait a minute. Oh, I got one of those air bubbles in my throat. Okay.
Don't worry about it. That kind of thing happens to me all the time, and
He went the next morning at 7:30, the very next morning, to go down there and show my grandmother where he had been standing. So he took, if you've ever seen copies of the Nix film in its entirety, the next thing that you see is that morning, and he shows the schoolbook depository, he shows the grassy knoll, he shows the stockade fence, which was of most interest to him. And he spends a lot of the time panning back and forth. And then the third section of the Nix film happens because after Thanksgiving, that weekend, by the way, they had canceled all the football games. And Texas, we're a big football state.
Right.
And so they doubled up the next weekend. And my mother's little brother's girlfriend was a majorette for South Oak Cliff High School. And she was performing. And so my mother's brother had asked my mother, do you think you could ask your father-in-law if he could go down there and take pictures? And so she asked my dad to call my grandfather, and that's what he did. He still had footage left. He still had film footage. So he went down there and filmed her performing as a majorette at the halftime of the football game. And when he was done, all this film was up, so that's when he dropped it off to get, oh my gosh. That's when he dropped it off to be developed at Dynacolor.
Right. Now, this actually explains for me why I see the rest of what I see on that film. Because, I didn't understand Now, and I knew that he had gone back the next day and filmed the plaza again. It's really brief, though. It's not very long at all.
Yeah, longer than the assassination footage, I think. Don't you think? Yeah.
No, definitely, because obviously he was just trying to capture, Kennedy as close as he could, and he did. He got a very good shot in the car driving away from him, and all of that. Like I said, this is where you do see the rear of the limousine going down Houston beforehand, and then it sort of jumps, and you see on the other side of the street. Now, most versions out there have been corrected so that the car doesn't look like it's going uphill. But I'm telling you, initially, the way the camera was angled, it does look like the car is going uphill. So you have an idea when you're looking at something that's a little closer to the original. But then, the next thing you see, all of a sudden, for no reason, it just kind of, after the car goes under the underpass and a few other things go by, the next thing is a brighter set of footage of the plaza again, nearly from the same angle. Well, you do get some other things too, people running and things like that in between. I'm trying to visually recreate this in my mind for a moment.
A copy of it before we did this. I'm sorry, I should have done that.
Not a problem. I'm just going through it though in my mind and just trying to give people an idea. Most people never see all that stuff though. They just see the sequence on Elm, or they don't know that they're looking at the Nix film on Houston Street, because it's usually cut into a montage of footage of the motorcade anyway.
Right.
And this is what happens. And again, there's also a mix-up with the Muchmore film, but I'm telling you, if you're looking at a much jumpier-looking film, it's the Muchmore film.
Right.
Not only that, but the copies that exist today of the Muchmore film, with very few exceptions, actually have a split in them at the moment of the headshot, which is a really weird kind of thing that happened.
It is.
But meanwhile, okay. Now, I do know that the Warren Commission got a copy of the Nix film over the next few months, but of course this is at least 30 or 60 days later, depending on whose account you listen to. They ended up with. Did they get the original or did they get a copy?
I've been told it was the original. I've been told. I'll be honest with you, Chuck. I'm 56. Never have I seen my grandfather's original film. Never, not one time. UPI says they did give them the original. It's the House Select Committee that there's questions as to whether or not it is the original or a copy. If that helps you any.
Yeah, see, that's why I asked that question.
Yeah.
Because it's hard to discern. We do know that, we know a lot about the Zapruder film and exactly how it traveled and things like that. And, of course, there's many questions about that as well. But the Nix film is even stranger to me because, again, a few years later, Mark Lane's film, Rush to Judgment again. This is one of the only times actually where I saw your grandfather get a chance to speak on film about anything.
Without anybody telling him to be quiet, yeah.
And about them telling him, not to mention what he thought he was observing during the assassination, mind you. I've seen it actually utilized, interspliced with something else where he keeps repeating, about the shots from the book depository and all that. But the film was actually used as evidence with the Warren Commission as well. And we're still not really sure as to whether that was the original or that was a copy. But something was returned back to your grandfather.
Oh, and now he did get a copy. They said after he went to New York and made the deal with UPI after being humiliated by Time Life, and he was so angry. UPI was waiting for him at the bottom of the stairs when he left Time Life, and they made a deal with him, and it wasn't but for $2,000 more than what Time Life had offered. But my grandfather was like, okay, I mean, if this is all, if it's a nuisance film, if it doesn't mean anything, then what the heck? This is better than a poke in the eye. So he made the deal with UPI and came back to Dallas. But before he did, they never wrote a contract with him. Never. It was done on a handshake and a small piece of paper. I mean, that was pretty much the contract. And they told him, my dad asked this. My dad said, well, will we ever get this film back? excuse me, and UPI said, in 25 years, copyright law, in 25 years, and that's why, Chuck, I started in '88 trying to get it back.
Well, because exactly that would be the 25-year window where you could start to get it back, because the deal was initially made in '60. Well, it was made in '63, I guess, but it might have been made in '64. Either way, your efforts would have been correct. Was it actually done in '63 or '64? It was
'63.
Okay. Because I was wondering, because there's a little strangeness there, because obviously the Warren Commission's investigation was going on in '64, and they had again either the copy or the original, not sure which, but they even reproduced some of the frames and all that.
Oh yeah, for 4 days in November, that book that they sent out. Well, Gary Mack told me something that I didn't know for years and years, that the weekend after, my grandfather went down there, to New York, December 5th or 6th. It was a weekend. And he had said, we'd rather you not use our names with all of this. And he said, oh, don't worry. But that very weekend, they distributed his film to their news. You know how you would go to the movies and they would give you those, and in the news, and there would be the Nix film going across, showing to the people who were at the movies,
Well, that was the thing. It actually got distributed to, UPI distributed it right away to a couple of news services, because there were actually newsprint versions of some of the frames that emerged early December also.
Right.
So I'm aware of that as well, and that was really odd, because, again, nobody even knew that there had been a deal for the film or anything, and it wasn't being identified as being filmed by Orville Nix either. It was just sort of, here's a film of the assassination.
Right.
They which...
gave him a copy, though. They did, when he got back home, I think it was the next Tuesday or Wednesday after that weekend, he got a fedora hat and a $5,000 check and a copy of the film. And my dad showed that film to every history class me, my brother, and sister were in from first grade through high school. So it was badly scratched and torn up, and it was a mess. He didn't realize how important it was.
Right, and that's the film that he's actually holding in the film Rush to Judgment, where he was talking about, it seemed as though the frame count was wrong, and a few other things, right? Mm-hmm. Okay. See, and then it gets even stranger, because UPI has it at this point, right? But of course, now we're talking about, 1964, okay, the Warren Commission finishes their investigation, hands in their stuff in September of '64. There's a re-examination in '68 by the Ramsey panel, and then there's a few other things that go on in the House regarding stuff that's peripheral to the assassination, and it starts to waken people a little bit in the congressional hallways, let's just say, about the possibility of reopening the investigation. And of course, once the Zapruder film was shown on television
in '75,
in '75, which is hysterical, because if anybody actually watches that night when Grodin showed it, Grodin had a piece of something that resembled, to me, what I know now as the Nix film.
That's right.
Interspliced into it, right?
That's right. Golly, Chuck, I promise you are the first person to say any, and I've been interviewed several times. I mean, you were the first person. I was sitting there watching it that night. I was a junior in high school. My parents were already asleep, and I should have put this in the book, and I didn't. But I was watching it that night, and I was like, oh, my gosh, there's my grandfather's film. That's not the Zapruder film. That's the Nix film. And I remember that. But it's in the middle of the night, because, that Good Morning. Was it Good Night America or Good Morning America? It's Good Night America.
Yeah, Geraldo was doing Good Night America, yep.
Right, yeah, and it played really late, like Saturday Night Live would now. It played really late. So the only people watching it were the insomniacs and the teenagers, they're college students that couldn't go to sleep. Yes, I do remember that. Oh, my gosh.
Yeah, and so there was pieces of, not only that, there was pieces of the, it was from various parts of the film, too. It wasn't just one part. There was some of it where he said it was commercial footage, which it was. before the motorcade gets into Dealey Plaza, and then there's a piece of the Zapruder film where, not the Zapruder film, excuse me. There's a piece of the Nix film from Houston Street.
Right.
Okay, then you have the Zapruder sequence, and then there's even more of the Nix film. Yeah. Which I was stunned to see that, there was no mention of where that came from. It's like been the mystery film off and on.
Right.
And like I said before, there was also still pictures printed. So, of course, this caused a reaction and caused the House Select Committee on Assassinations to actually be formed because of public sentiment. I mean, Dick Gregory had been on with Geraldo and Robert Groden, who previous to that had kind of been known in, let's just say, conspiracy or assassination researcher circles as the guy who had the film. Because he had a pretty good collection of the films, which nobody had at that point outside of the bootleg Zapruder films, which had surfaced post 1968 and all that. But the Nix film had actually, in part, made its way around too. It just was never really ascribed to Orville Nix. It was just sort of, here's other footage.
Right, that's right.
And I found it remarkable that night that we were talking about the Zapruder film, and yes, the Zapruder film is, a shocking sort of thing, especially for those who have never seen it. I mean, now it's commonplace. You can find it 800 places on the internet. You even go to my YouTube channel, you can see a frame by frame of it. I mean, everybody's got it nowadays, but I mean, back in the 70s, this thing was pretty much unheard of except on some college campuses and things.
That's right.
And the Nix film, again, would sometimes be shown along with it.
There was someone, and well, it's another long story that we'll talk about some other time, but there was some man in Canada that was selling bootleg copies of the Nix film, and I have never known where he got those. That was in the 70s, too.
Yeah.
I don't know if he got those from Robert Groden or from, Harold Weisberg had one. All of the first-generation researchers had one because they bought it from this guy in Canada. And I know this because when I started looking for the original, I tried to find that man and never could. You don't by chance know who it is, do you?
I will talk to you off the air.
Okay.
I actually have an idea of who this might be.
Yeah.
Yeah, because, like I said, that film started to circulate along with the Zapruder film. It was like the second reel that was played at those college, like I say, those college get-togethers where they would show it and discuss the assassination, late 60s, early 70s. Uh-huh. And there's a possibility that there is a guy that you could get in contact with that either is the guy or is very closely associated to him.
Okay. Thank you, Chuck.
Okay, but I don't want to give that out on the air because,
I don't blame you.
And I may be wrong as well, but it might just give you another trail to go down that, hopefully it'll get you to where you got to go, and I'll be more than happy to help you with that. But let's get back to the history of this, for the public's consumption.
We know it, and everybody does it, and I keep forgetting that people don't know. First off, I'm really surprised that they know even the Nix film. I can't tell you how many people I've talked to and they say the Nix film, I've never even heard of that. I mean, people still don't even know that that's the name of it.
Yeah, exactly. But like I said, because it had kind of just gone around as the other film.
Right.
Again, the Muchmore film, although it was more widely available, actually, that's the funny part. The Muchmore film had gotten sort of let's put it this way. Some of the opposite side of the street from Zapruder, like still frames that had circulated in underground magazines and things, actually came from the Muchmore film at first.
That's right.
And the Nix film, though, if you could get your hands on it, like you said, those first-generation researchers got their hands on it. You could get it in its actual film form, but somebody had gone out and made a lot more copies off of the Muchmore stills, which, again, I don't know exactly why, because I've never really gone deeply into the Muchmore film, but it seems as though the speed was different on her camera, and she just wasn't taking as high quality, you could set these on different speeds. Right. And this is, something that a lot of people don't realize. So if you set it sort of at a lower speed, you could get more out of your film,
Right.
but the quality of your film would not be as good, you know?
That's right.
And that's sort of what hers was. His was kind of set to the better setting, so that you get a little more smoothness in the action of the film, actually, from hers. Plus, she wasn't holding it very steady either, so that's why the film kind of jumps around and blurs a little bit in spots, too. Which is really odd that he wasn't even intentionally shooting the Elm Street sequence because he was holding it pretty steady. I guess, like you said, I mean, it makes perfect sense if he was actually nervous, because Dealey Plaza is a huge echo chamber.
Yes, it is.
So when the shots were fired, he probably at first had heard it and did not know which direction it was coming from on that first shot.
Right.
And anybody who has studied this could tell you that, there's various numbers of shots that occurred, but let's just for the sake of discussion stick with the idea that there was 3, which I don't believe, but
and he didn't either. Okay.
But we'll just go with that for now, so we have no arguments.
Okay.
Let's just assume that we have 3 shots. The first shot, he probably didn't know what it was. The second shot might have registered as a gunshot, and he's worried about it. And, some people will freeze for a moment or not know exactly what to do or try and look around and see where it's coming from or whatever else. Third shot, now he's scared because he knows it's a gunshot. It's kind of remarkable to me that even if there were only 3 shots and he had no idea what was going on and didn't lay his eyes on anything and didn't have an idea where the shots were coming from, which we do know that he did have an idea, but let's just say that he didn't for a second, it's still remarkable that he held that camera as still as he did.
I think so too. But I'm going to attribute it, like I said before, to his height. And he was looking through it and squeezing. And I don't think he realized he was looking through it and squeezing it. You know what I mean? At least that's what he told us for years and years and years. Also, like you said, I think he was so scared. I mean, knowing what was going on and didn't know how to react and was thinking, what the heck is going on here? And I think all of those come into play. I think all of those feelings, emotions, and reactions come into play with that film. I really do.
Well, yeah, and now here's the next part of the story, because we're going to go back to the government handling the film and everything else, and the news agencies and everything else handling it. So we have the House Select Committee on Assassinations, which is formed post that showing on Geraldo's show in the 70s. Okay, and that continued up to 79. Now, they asked for films to be sent in by various people, including your grandfather. They wanted to see the films again, even though they should have actually had themselves copies already, and did have copies, in government hands of most of these things already. I mean, they reproduced frames in the Warren Commission volumes of the Nix film. Right. So it's not like they never had possession of this thing at any time. But they again requested that they see it again. I know for certain that they asked for the Zapruder film. I know for certain they asked for the Pascal film. I know for certain they asked for the Nix film. I do believe they also asked for the Muchmore film and the Hughes film. But that's another story. But here's the thing. So he gives it to them, right?
UPI did. UPI still owned the copyright. That was all UPI.
Okay, they had to go to UPI to get Muchmore and Nix. You're right. Okay, good. That's true. Now, here's the bad part. So they returned the films. They say, the House Select Committee, the people that were in charge of getting the films and doing the reproductions or the showings or whatever it is they needed to do, they should have handed them all back in 1978.
Right. That's right.
So it should have went back into UPI's possession in 1978, along with the Muchmore film, which is now also missing.
No, I think they found the Muchmore film is in AP in London.
No kidding.
That's what they told me. I called the Associated Press. Okay, I didn't put this in the book either, so this is good. I called the Associated Press because that's who bought all the holdings from UPI, which I suppose would mean they gathered their debts too. I don't know. But yes, they've got the Muchmore film in England.
Well, see, now what's weird about that is, of course, UPI still had possession of it in the 80s, and possibly.
Oh, Chuck, I'm sorry. Let me add something to that. Maurice Schoenfeld, who is still alive and is the man, along with Burt Reinhardt, who made the deal with my grandfather in '63.
Mm-hmm.
He said, I've talked to him on numerous occasions trying to find this film. He went on to start CNN and the Food Network, by the way. But anyway, he said that they had spliced the Muchmore film into pieces to use at different times. And I said, well, do you remember ever splicing it to the Nix film? I mean, if you're so busy up there, tearing films apart and splicing them. I mean, and he said, I don't know. But that has always been something in the back of my mind. And so that's why I called AP, since I knew that they had taken the whole, to say, please, would you just go look in your archives and see if the Nix film could accidentally be attached to the Muchmore film there, And of course, I've never gotten a definitive answer as to yes or no.
Well, in all fairness, they may not be aware which is which.
That's true.
That's a possibility. Look, I don't mean to defend a large company, believe me.
Oh, I
know. not my style, but I mean, it could be sheer ignorance that they have it all in one box. Because again, like I said, it's sort of similar, visually. If one just sort of looks over it quickly and doesn't know what they're looking at, you might very easily confuse the two if you look at the key sequence.
Right.
So this is a possibility. But UPI, I know for sure, had possession of it in the 80s.
Oh, yeah.
Because they were releasing VHS things on the Kennedy assassination left and right, especially around the 25th anniversary.
Right. And that's what caused the man that I was dealing with at the time to lose his job. And Michael Vive, if you're listening, first off, no, you are an whistleblower way before Edward Snowden. You're a good man, and I am so sorry that I caused you to lose your job. Michael Vive was the attorney with UPI. And when I called in '88 to say, okay, I'm Gayle Nix Jackson. I'm looking for my grandfather's film. It's been 25 years. We were told we could have it back. And he goes, you're absolutely right. 25 years was what the copyright law was. In '79, it changed to 27 years, by the way. But he was going by the '63 law that it was 25 years. And he said, you're absolutely right. And I will happily give it back to you. I mean, I had to tell him who we were. I had to give him evidence. I mean, it wasn't like we just did this over the phone and he would do this with anyone. But I waited a few days for a phone call from him, and I didn't get it. And when I called back, he was no longer with the company. And I spoke with another lawyer whose name, well, he wasn't a very nice man, so I won't mention his name. And he said he had no business telling you that. Copyright law is now, we keep it for 20, we've got it with us for 2 more years. You can have it in 1990. So that's why. I mean, I probably called in the middle of all their making money on the Nix film with their VHS sales. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And upset and got poor Mr. Vive fired. I didn't mean to do that, but it happened. So.
Well, right, because that was the 25th anniversary, so, and a lot of stuff came out. Not only did they just, release the film, because at one point I recall having a VHS copy of just the Nix film, okay? Really? Yeah, there was a Just the Nix film that came out, and I'm pretty sure it had a UPI stamp on the side, but I also know for a fact that I still possess stuff that incorporated the Nix film into larger documentaries about the assassination, all of that stuff being issued by UPI, a lot of it with 1988 and 87 copyrights on it. Okay, so this stuff did exist in their hands at some point. They weren't making it from second, third generation copies when they were putting it on there. It's not bad, to look at it the way it is. I mean, it's not as good as it could be nowadays, mind you.
Right.
We could do a lot with this film if we could rediscover it. Now, something that I don't know if you've looked at, but I mean, when the Assassination Records Review Board came around in the 90s, because now we're skipping ahead, because you started in '88 looking at this, and you went to the company that should have been holding it and should have been releasing it after 25 years back to your family. When you went to when we go to the Assassination Records Review Board in the mid '90s, they looked at some of the evidence. They wound up spending a lot of time on the Zapruder film. And a lot of money, by the way, on the Zapruder film.
Yes, they did.
Quite a fortune that family reaped from that film. But, you know, and if you don't believe me, look it up. They actually sold a duplicate copy to the government of the United States for a huge amount of money, and then got to keep the copyright on top of it, believe it or not.
Yes, it just kills me. Oh my gosh. This is supposed to be the most important piece of evidence in the assassination, and all this happens. I mean, Time Life sold it back to them in the 70s for $1. And I've got UPI saying, no, you can't have it, and you've got to wait 2 more years, and, oh, by the way, we no longer have the original. And it just is all very odd. If there was ever, to me, a reason to follow the money, or to follow careers, to follow the fame, power, and fortune, it is with the Zapruder film and the Nix film. Because the Nix film, as far as our family goes, I mean, we didn't, $5,000 is what my grandfather made. You know, now, when I had it, I did allow people to use it, pay usage rights for it. And I'll be honest with you, I always put it to CBS and to ABC and NBC, always, every time. But people like NPR or people who were writing books and just went, I wouldn't do it to them. But I felt so badly after the way they had treated my grandfather. It was my own little form of revenge during that time, when I did have the copyright during that time.
Well, that's good to know, because I do intend to release a book at some point. So
I don't own it anymore. Again, Charles. I mean, Chuck. I'm sorry. You need to. Well, I don't know that you want to jump ahead to this, but I'm telling you, this whole Nix thing, that's why I wrote the book. There is so much to it. In 1999, okay, I had just had my son, who is now 15, and I was an elderly lady by then. I was 41, and we had moved out to East Texas, and we bought this big house my mother wanted to live in, and we'd put a down payment on it, yada, yada, yada. Long story short, the lady came back and wanted additional money. And my dad, me being the eldest, he's like, Gayle, what are we going to do? And I said, well, I guess we're going to find another house, because we haven't got any more additional money to put in on it. Well, yes, we do. We have the film. And I said, Dad, there is no way I am selling the film. No way I'm selling the film. Chuck, a man from Chicago who owns several newspapers in the Chicago and surrounding areas had called me about 7 months earlier, maybe 8, and had offered me $450,000 for the copyright. And in 1999, it was a lot of money. Well, heck, now it's a lot of money. But I said, no. It took me too long to get it back into our family. I'm not interested in making money from, you know what I mean, from this horrible, terrible thing. And anyway, my dad and I, the family, we had a little bit. I'm just being transparent. I can't ask people to be transparent if I'm not. He said, well, you know what, Gayle, I'm sorry about the dogs too. Sorry.
No problem.
I am the only son. I'm the only living heir for the family. Really and truly, in a court of law, that would be my film. And he's right. I mean, it would be. It would be. And he said, I'm going to sell it. And I said, well, I'm not going to have any part of it. But I kind of did, because I called Gary Mack, because we were friends then. And I said, Gary, please tell my dad you don't have any money. Tell him you don't want this film. Tell him you don't. But of course he's not going to do that. I mean, what museum wouldn't want to have the copyright to a home movie of the JFK assassination? So to make a really long story short, and there are many more details to this, my dad sold the copyright to the 6th Floor Museum. Now they would tell you it's donated, but I have the contract that says no, it's different. So, yeah, I don't own the copyright. The only thing I did do, because our lawyer at that time was James Silverberg, who was also the Zapruder lawyer, who then became the 6th Floor Museum lawyer, I did have him put a clause in the contract saying, if the original is ever found, it belongs to me, Gayle Nix Jackson, and our family. Which is, again, the reason why I'm really trying so hard. I always have tried so hard to try and find it. But I did have that clause put in the contract. So now,
Well, let's back up just a little bit because you ended up getting the copyright back. How did you even do that?
From UPI?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, in 1990, they realized that copyright law said I could have it back, and they signed a contract saying, okay, we're going to give it all back to you. And by that time, Worldwide Television News had taken over UPI because it was defunct. I mean, there wasn't a UPI per se. It was Worldwide Television News, WTN. Mm-hmm. So I talked to a really nice man there, too, who had no problem. He said, okay, I will gather up all the copies we have. I will gather up all the film reels we have, and you can come get it. Well, at that time, I was a graduate student. I was in grad school. I didn't have money to be flying to New York, you know. So Gary Mack said, like I said, we were all friends back then. That was back in the 90s, early 90s. He said, Gayle, Robert Groden lives right there, you know, in Boothwyn, Pennsylvania. He's a photo expert. He could tell. Let him go pick up your copies for you. And I said, okay. So I wrote a letter and said, Robert Groden will be my courier, and he will be picking it up, all these things up for me. And that's what happened. He went and picked up all of the reels that were there and then called and said, there's no original here. And that's true. There was no original. But, you know, there's another story there. I don't know if you want me to tell it or not. In regards to Robert Groden, many years people have thought that Robert Groden has done some great things for the JFK community. I mean, giving Geraldo, the Zapruder / Nix / much more film to be shown, that was a good thing, or there would have never been a House Select Committee. But he also has the idea that a lot of things he finds he needs to take care of. And I've always sincerely hoped he didn't feel that way about the Nix film, though I did drive up to Boothwyn and met with him, and I asked him to his face to face, Robert, have you got my film? And he said, no, Gayle, I don't. But me being the intuitive, jaded woman that I am, I went in there and asked his wife, and who, God forbid, she's passed away now, but I asked her, I said, Chris, does Robert have my film? And she never answered me. She just looked down at the ground. So, I mean, I don't know. I don't know if someone's got it within our community. I don't know if it's been shredded. I don't know if it's hidden away in some big box. Like, remember the end of Citizen Kane? And Rose in a big box? I mean, I don't know. I will tell you, I have spoken to Shakes and Dubois. I have spoken with the Mexican president, Vicente Fox. Robert Blakey and I should have had a hotline for many years because he said, Gayle, if we lost this film while it was under my charge, I think House Record 453 will find you some relief, which of course was the JFK Assassination Act, but that's not what happened. So I just don't know, Chuck. It's like one of those treasures that you never find. It's like a bad Nicolas Cage movie. It's like National Treasure. You keep looking for hints and clues, and you just can't find it. Yeah, you know.
Well, you know, my stomach drops when I think about you know, and I gotta be careful about what I say here because I've had experiences over the years with a lot of individuals in the assassination research community.
Yeah.
And there is something that some of us joke about, and we call it the Groden black hole.
I understand that black hole is like a couple of suitcases, is what I gather. That's what I've heard.
Yeah, something like that. And I sincerely hope that that's not the case. I really do.
I will tell you without mentioning names because I don't want to get you in trouble, but I've already said all this in my book, so it's okay. I'm not going to mention his next name, but this is another researcher who wrote a really big, thick book, and if I knew the year, it would help you guys figure out. He lives in California, and one of his initials is D. But he told me when I went on Geraldo's show, he said, Gayle, do you know any low people in high places? I said, no, I really don't. He said, you need to go have somebody rifle his house. I just know that that's where it is. And I said, I asked him. He said it wasn't. So, I mean, I've got to do. That's between him and God. And I'm sorry, I don't mean to proselytize. But I've done what I could do. I've asked, and I'm not litigious. I mean, I'm not Sue happy, though I'm thinking maybe I need to be, and I just don't know what to do, Chuck. That's why I wrote the book. It sure wasn't to make any money, and it sure I've stayed married because I self-published it, did it all on my own, other than paying the editor and paying the web person and paying the formatter. But I just want to find my grandfather's film before I die. It's like I said, he was there for a reason. And when Mo Weitzman goes in front of the ARRB, Chuck, and says, "Oh, by the way," just out of nowhere, they're not even really asking him about the Nix film. He's supposed to be talking about the Zapruder film. I saw this funny little film UPI had brought to me to look at, and there, when you look down the stockade fence line, is a figure. And it looks to me like the person, whoever that is, whatever that is, wearing a red bandana and holding a metallic object and two pink blobs holding that metallic object. And he said it's not there for one frame. It's there for several frames, and then it just moves down the fence line and is gone. And I'm thinking, why has no JFK researcher, this has been around since the 90s. I didn't even know about it until I wrote my book. I didn't know.
Well, I'll tell you why nobody's really focused on it is because the available copies to most researchers now do not show that. It's very, very dark in that area.
That's right, and he had the original. Mo had access to the original at that time, so that's what he was looking at, as was Jones Harris. And you know that Jones Harris's Classic Gunman, that got ripped to shreds by iTech, who was owned by Frank Lindsay of the CIA. And I have since sent that iTech study to Rolly Zavada and other people who said, well, no, he didn't say this, but others have said that we're true photogrammetrists, true photo experts, who have said that iTech study is more a joke than anything they've ever read. It's just a matter of using big words. They don't actually say there's nothing there, but they make it sound like there's nothing there. They imply. They insinuate. But for years, people said, oh, well, iTech has blown away what Jones Harris says he thought he saw there. That was nothing more than shadows and leaves. And quite honestly, Chuck, I believed it too. I believed it too.
Well, for the copies that you can see nowadays, you couldn't argue with it.
Right.
This is the thing, but of course iTech had access to at least something close to the original, if not the original. And of course, as these things get copied, detail is lost.
Oh, yeah.
Way more than we're used to now. But I mean, it's not like you're taking digital copies of things here. These are degraded every single time you do this. Even the so-called duplicate print of the Nix film that I've seen is still of a lesser quality than what it should be. You can tell that there's deterioration in the image. And I have poor eyesight, so I've been often named the blind JFK researcher because I'm actually legally blind. But that being said, I also have a high light sensitivity. So when I've examined these films and I've had them projected and things like that, I actually catch details that a lot of other people don't. Okay, because of the fact that I have like an ocular albinism, which causes my eyes to be extremely light sensitive. So when we do slightly different projections of these films, there's a whole lot of stuff going on out there that is not being seen when you're watching these copies on the internet. And I again have never seen anything closer to the best I can estimate is a third generation copy of the Nix film. But it is true. The iTech study is a big misdirection. It's like a magic trick. Don't watch my left hand because I'm going to tell you about the digits and all of the wonderful bones in my right hand. Right. This is what's going on here. And
see, there's what you have to ask is why? Why did the government, why did our tax dollars get spent on these kind of things? I mean, why? Why are they hiding, or why is it gone? What is it that the Nix film shows? Chuck, I have always been very open-minded about it. If it does not, if we could find the original, have it analyzed, and it shows nothing up there, I'm okay with that. But if it shows that there is somebody up there shouldn't we have known this like 51 years ago? I mean, either way, shouldn't we have known this? You know?
Well, and believe me, that's exactly where I'm at too. Is that, you know, if there was something to, if there was nothing to hide, okay, if there was no reason to consider anything other than, you know, one guy in the 6th floor window, you know, shooting with the old World War II Italian Mannlicher Carcano war surplus thing that he got with a scope on it, even though he couldn't order it that way and everything else. If there was nothing more to it other than this one, you know, crazed gunman who wanted to get himself into the history books, if that's the case, why do we still have classified papers? Why do we still have misdirection and missing pieces of evidence? The film evidence, you know, the Harper fragment is, you know, dust in the wind at this point. You know, all this stuff leads us to wonder why it needs to be hidden. You know, and this is the first question that you have to ask. Now, I'm going to take phone calls if that's okay, unless you want to get into more of the story.
Oh, no, you just ask. I promise you, I could sit here and take up all the rest of your night talking about all the things that I've done or know about with the Nix film, but I still feel like you're more probably an expert at looking at my grandfather's film than I am. All I know is that, again, from a woman's point of view, and I'm not being sexist at all, because I'm not. I think my grandfather was there for a reason. It concerns me that every person I talked to on the House Select Committee that studied the film at Caltech, at JPL, at iTech, all went on to these illustrious careers and, you know, these things. And it's as if touching the Nix film, the original Nix film, means it's like the magic genie. What 3 wishes would you like? Here you go. You know, yet we can't find it anywhere. I mean, and I do want to say this. When I spoke with Dr. Snow and Dr. Paul Rutling, who were on the photo analysis committees for the House Select Committee, neither one of them ever saw the Nix film in its entirety. Now, Chuck, you've got all this money at your access. You've got a film that you can analyze and look at by experts. Why are you not doing it? Why are you only looking at a few frames? And who decided which frames they were going to look at?
Well, see, I'll tell you something about that House Select Committee photo panel. Okay, they actually commissioned people to try and fool them. You know, to fake some photographs, some stills even. And the expert panel there could not tell the difference between the fake photographs and the real ones.
Really?
I
didn't know that.
Well, that was a report that they tried to bury for a long time. I can't think of the name of the report right off the top of my head, but if I had a moment to probably look around, I could figure it out. But there was actually a report there where they tried to fool them. Essentially, they gave them you know, phonied up photographs, and they could not identify where the fakery was. So I wouldn't put a lot of faith into these guys who did go on to some of these better careers. But it is interesting. Of course, the most easy to cite example is a guy like Arlen Specter, who switching back and forth between the Democrat and the Republican Party throughout his career. Yeah. You know, remained a senator and then retired and had himself a rather long career, you know, in public service and all that kind of good stuff, and got himself a sweet kind of job right afterwards, and never seemed to suffer again for a job after being a junior Warren Commission member there, and junior counsel to the Warren Commission, I should say. Of course, the senior counsel who was supposed to be working with him never showed up again after showing up once. That guy's name was Adams, by the way. You know, it's awfully interesting, the trails that people seem to come out of after they turn around and they basically obfuscate the evidence. And the Nix film is definitely part of the story here. It has never been represented properly. The original has not been actually shown to the American public, in my estimation. UPI had it, I think, but. You know, but the thing is, at which point did they lose control of it? I'm not sure. It's a very strange scenario. And at one point, like I was saying at the beginning of the show, there was even this possibility where they said an executive had put it into a safe deposit box.
Alexander Bach was his name. I spoke with him, and I've got a letter from him. And you know what he says to me, Chuck? I don't even know what you're talking about. I never put any film in a safety deposit box. I don't even know what safety deposit box you're talking about. You need to talk to somebody in our finance department, who, of course, was no longer there. Because UPI was gone. I mean, they were done. Well, and Maurice Schoenfeld swore up and down, it's in a safety deposit box at Chase Manhattan. Well, I mean, I'm sorry, Clinton United was the name of the bank that was razed, demolished, and then it became a Chase Manhattan Bank downtown New York.
Well, right, and then by the time we actually got to hear this story, I mean, I don't know how early on you heard it, but by the time we got to hear about it, the person that could have possibly done it had already passed away, so we had a complete dead end. You know, so it's like, but the constant stories where they just send you on these dead-end paths, I mean, this is what you've been through trying to get it back, right?
For years and years and years, and I get excited. It still hasn't jaded me so that I go, oh yeah, whatever. I mean, I still follow them. I do, hoping that this one will be for real, that this person's telling the truth, that this person isn't just trying to interject themselves into a horrible part of history. I mean, I try, and I don't give up. Of course, my sister and my brother are like, you're insane. You should be working on your books. You should be working on, you know, other things that you spend your time doing this. Why are you doing this? And it's because my grandfather was never shown, in my opinion, the respect he deserved when he was alive. And if I can do anything to help that situation, that's what I'm doing too. Because like I've said over and over, he was there for a reason, you know? There was a reason he was taking this film. There's a reason why it's missing.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with you, and I think that's one of the things that I do find sad as well. And as time goes on, we are losing so many of the people that were assassination witnesses. You know, I have lamented on this show a couple of times that, I mean, James Tague was somebody who I had great access to, kind of got angry at me toward the end of his life because I would not agree that his insider information about Lyndon Johnson being completely responsible for the assassination was true. So he would argue with me from time to time, but I never got him on this show because he actually passed away kind of suddenly. Yes. And I really wish I had gotten him on and kind of gotten him to calm down about his LBJ thing a little bit with me, but one of these things that just happens. And unfortunately, when did your grandfather pass away, by the way?
72.
Right, and I mean, we lost him a very long time ago, and like I said, over the years, though, usually attribution is not even given to him for taking the film,
right?
Except in cases where you have, you know, extensive studies where a lot of them are looped together now, and at least they're, you know, at least they recognize it as the Nix film and show you the difference between, like I said, the Much More film and the Nix film. But
Chuck, if you had seen, you would understand why I do all this. I think that you would. I sense that you would. I watched my grandfather, who I just told you only had a 4th grade education, thought I was so bright because I could read and write before I even went to kindergarten. You know, so that to him was a big deal. He was very insecure about his education and being around people of greater stature per se than he. But this was a man who even looked at the telephone as high technology. And when my sister and brother and I spent the weekends with him, so that my mom and dad would go out or whatever, we would get in trouble if we didn't answer the phone on the first ring because it was just rude. You answer the phone as soon as it rings. You don't wait around. Well, after he started receiving, and he got some hateful phone calls. Now, were they threatening, saying they were going to kill him? No. But they were scary enough to him that he wouldn't let us answer the phone anymore afterwards. I mean, they were, and then Penn Jones had come to his house so many times that my grandmother was scared to death. She was like, oh, horrible. I don't want you talking about this anymore. I don't want you to die. What if it's true about all these deaths and all? And, you know, that was later on. That was later, like the late 60s, I guess, is when that was. But Yeah, he got to the point where he was proud of having a piece of history that he felt like he was a part of, to wishing he had never even been there that day, because the way he was treated and the intimidation, and no one ever believed in him. Not his friends did, his family did, but when you're talking to CBS and they're telling you, now, Mr. Nix, that's not what you heard. What does the Warren Commission say you heard? You know?
Well, and, I do want to address that, because that is the one thing that has irritated me to no end regarding just, reading about, following, and watching just that short bit of film with him speaking about it. This has been the one thing that has bothered me, because, again, the guy strikes me as just a regular guy who pretty much, acceded to the appeal to authority, figured that the people in charge were telling him something, generally speaking. He wasn't somebody who was going to, challenge authority or challenge the story. This wasn't what he was out to do. He was just trying to be honest about what he saw and heard. And, just for the listener who might not be aware, you want to discuss what he said about what he heard that day in Dealey Plaza? Because let's not forget, he was also an assassination witness. Not only did he take a film, but he also had his own personal ideas about what he saw, what he heard, and what his impressions were that happened that day. So I'd like to get to that.
Yeah, never called in front of the Warren Commission. Abernathy and some of the guys took his deposition at the FBI here in Dallas. But, yes, that was another time that he took me, my sister, and my brother. He thought he was going to get to meet Walter Cronkite. CBS had said they were doing this special in Dealey Plaza. Did the Warren Commission get it right or whatever it was? I don't even remember the name of it. But
wait a minute. So that means that that actually you were around for that special in '68?
Yes, I was. So was my sister and brother, yes.
Because that's another time that he was captured on film where they talked to him about it, and that was one of the very few times I ever saw on television where he was allowed to talk about it, and that was in '68, where they did a 4-part series.
Right. And they said to him, all right, well, they were putting makeup on him and everything, which we thought was kind of funny, but they said to him, all right, when it was his turn, he was being interviewed by Eddie Barker here from the Dallas area, KRLD, the CBS affiliate.
Right.
And the man in charge, his name was Bernie Birnbaum with CBS. And so my grandfather had already had my mother type letters to Walter Cronkite saying, oh, I can't wait to meet you, because he really did think that Walter Cronkite was going to be down there. And
let me just cut you off for one more second, though, because you're aware that KRLD also did a cooperative effort with the Secret Service, where they utilized the Zapruder film and the Nix film to show stuff that happened in Dealey Plaza, and they made a film in conjunction with the U.S. Secret Service.
And I have heard stories about that either it's that film or the Nix film has been used as training material for agents of any alphabet organization. I've heard that. Now, I don't know if it's true or not.
Well, yeah. I can show you that. I have it on one of my video channels. I'll get you the link while you're telling the story about this.
Okay, that's great, Chuck. Thank you. Yes, so my grandfather took us down there because, again, this was a time for him to, show us the media and for him to feel important, because he was important, but he was never made to feel that way. And so, anyway, they're asking him, Mr. Nix, you were here that day, you took a film, where were you standing? He showed them. And they'd say, okay, and where do you feel that the shots came from? And he said, well, over there at that stockade fence. And that's the picket fence he called the stockade fence. And they would say, cut, cut, cut. And he would stop, and he thought, oh, well, I must have misspoke, or I said something wrong, or he didn't really know the first few times. And so they'd start him all over again. Okay, Mr. Nix, you're a witness. You took the film. Where do you feel like the shots came from, or where did you hear the shots came from? And he'd say, over there at the stockade fence. And he said it. That went on 3 or 4 times, maybe more. I was a kid. I was just a kid. 3 or 4 times. And finally, Bernie Birnbaum, the head guy from CBS, came over to him. He said, Orville, you know what the Warren Commission said. Where did they say that the shots came from? And he said, well, they said they came from the school book depository. And he said, well, okay, that's what we need you to say. And so the next take, that's what it was. They said, Mr. Nix, where did the shots come from? And he said, this Texas School Book Depository. Thank you. And that was it. That's all. I mean, that's pretty much all that he said. So he left. That was another time he was very, very upset. And we left with him to go out to the car. I was the oldest, so I got to sit in the front seat. My brother and sister were in the back. And he lit a cigarette. He already had one lit in the ashtray, but he lit another one. He was that upset. And as he turned the car on, he banged the steering wheel several times. And I said, what's the matter, Papa? You did good. I mean, what's the matter? And he looked at me and he looked, back at my sister and brother. And he said, I want you guys to know, I know that the shots came from the stockade fence. And I don't understand why they keep trying to make me feel like an idiot and that I don't know what I saw. And I mean, he had tears in his eyes. And as a little kid, okay, I was 10, almost 11. You remember those things. You see your grandfather that you love. It's like looking at your parents that you love when they're in an emotional state of any kind, and you remember those things. And that was it. I mean, after that, before that, Jim Garrison had asked him to come testify. He wouldn't do it. I mean, he didn't talk anymore after that. That one did it. That's the one. That CBS thing is what did it for him, where he wouldn't talk about it anymore. Not on tape, not on radio, not on interview. Now, I'm lying a little bit because Wes Wise, who later became the mayor of Dallas, would come over all the time and talk to him about it, talk to him about what he saw and what he heard, and But as far as it ever being on any more media, he didn't do it.
No, he never did actually make an appearance publicly again. And and I've heard that story recounted, but you actually saw that whole sequence where they were telling him basically, now you just got to tell us that the shots came from the book depository building, and that's it. Yes,
and do you remember? Okay, Emilio, what was his name that worked with Mark Lane? Emilio de San Antonio. Was that his name? Emilio. Oh, do you know what I'm talking about, Chuck?
Yeah, he was the guy who directed Rush to Judgment.
Yeah. Yes. Emilio called me one time before he, and we were trying to find those outtakes from CBS because I said over and over, I said, if y'all find those outtakes, I promise you'd see it. You would see, and he tried, and Gary Mack tried to find those outtakes from CBS because they were around. They were.
Well, that was another adventurous story, to be honest with you. Even during the ARRB, there was lots of people lobbying to try and get the outtakes from CBS, and CBS turned around and sent them a couple of things, which are now in the National Archives. You can get your hands on, like say the broadcast version,
right,
of that day, but you can't get your hands on the outtakes, apparently.
Right. That's right.
They never sent them over. They had first started making copies of things and sent them over to the National Archives, and what happened later was they said, well, if you want to fund some of these, we volunteered some of our time and tape and whatever. If you want some more, you can pay us some more money. But honestly, after the Zapruder family kind of drained the budget...
I'd say enough for a small nation to survive on for a year or so.
Right, yeah. Without having to surrender the copyright, I say again.
Right.
And then they donated, I hold up air quotes again, donated their duplicate copy to the 6th floor as well, just so people know.
Yeah, that's right.
And
all kinds of digressions, there's all kinds of injustices. There's so many innocent people. I mean, John F. Kennedy was killed that day. His family suffered it for years. But it wasn't just he. It were many people that were witnesses that day or were there that day were scared half out of their minds the rest of their lives to talk or say anything about anything. And that's horrible. I mean, horrible.
And some people were actually being surveilled by different federal agencies afterwards for like 2 years, simply by being present in the plaza. Did your grandfather ever talk about any of that? Like, did he have any of that kind of trouble?
That's why I put this in the book, because he had told me a few times, but before he died, he always felt like he saw shadows around the house at weird times. And he would just kind of say, oh, well, maybe it's my eyesight, or maybe I should put my glasses on. He would never think it was anything sinister or dubious or anything. And as a matter of fact, I talked to Marianne Mormon, and, she never had these issues at all, but her friend Gene Hill did. And, that Wesley Buell Frazier, I've talked to him several times. He was intimidated, and I don't know that he received any phone calls. I don't believe so. But my goodness, he received all his intimidation the night of and that whole weekend of, So,
right, and just for the listener, Buell Wesley Frazier was the guy who actually gave Oswald a ride to work and all that kind of stuff, and they hammered him for many, many years over the whether Oswald carried a package into the school book depository and all that. Gene Hill, just for everybody again, you can actually see Gene Hill in the Nix film. She's the one wearing the, I believe it's a red raincoat.
Mary Mormon standing next to her,
taking her Polaroid picture, which is just about at the moment of the headshot, or a split second afterwards, depending on who you listen to. And of course, this has been one of the most, I think, the most widely circulated Polaroid I've ever heard of. And that's out there. And meanwhile, by the way, your grandfather's camera, it resides at the 6th floor now, doesn't it?
My goodness, I can't believe I forgot that story. I'm sorry. See, I told you we could be on here for several hours. Okay, so that was one of my grandfather's biggest. He was more upset about that, I think, than Time Life calling his film a nuisance film. When the Warren Commission needed to look at cameras, or J. Edgar Hoover called and said, we need the Nix camera. They asked him to bring it down there, which of course he did. He wasn't going to upset anybody in the government. He wanted to help in any way that he could. So he took his camera down there and he said, okay, how long are you going to have it? Because I'm going to go on vacation in a few months. They go, oh, don't worry about it. I mean, we won't have it that long. They kept it for 5 months, Chuck. And when he finally got it back, my dad went with him to go pick it up. And it came back in a box, and my dad was carrying the box, and he kind of jiggled it, and he said, Dad, did you put more in here than just a camera? Did you give him other stuff? He goes, no, what are you talking about? And he said, well, because I hear things moving around in this box. They opened up the box, and there his camera was in pieces, Chuck, with the spring, bent. To me, that is the most telling thing of all of it, is that the timing spring is bent. Why would they need to do that? I mean, why is it all taken apart the way that it is? And so my grandfather lost it. I mean, that's his expensive camera.
Really quickly, let me just relate something for the listener out there, because I think this is misunderstood. The spring, understand this about those kind of cameras at that time. Most of them were wind-up. Right. They were not battery-powered. You actually wound up the spring. This is what actually fed. It was spring-loaded, basically. The film would go through the shutter and all that. So what happens is, the nature of the spring and the condition of the spring would actually directly influence exactly how your camera operated.
Right.
Okay, this is what some of the discussion was over the Zapruder camera and exactly how fast the film was going, and they determined it was 18 frames and all this other stuff. But the thing is, if you toy with that spring in any way, you'll never be able to reproduce what it is you filmed. Like, let's just say we wanted to take the Zapruder camera today and load it with film, or we wanted to take the Nix camera today and load it with film and try and just shoot the plaza in exactly the same sequence that these individuals did. You can't do that anymore if you don't have the spring.
Right.
So the spring having been destroyed meant that there was no way that he could ever reconstitute his camera and again shoot the sequence and see what he should have seen or whatever else.
Right.
And that...
very telling to me. I think it is that. What would be the need for doing that?
It leads me to some conclusions.
You crazy conspiracy nut. Isn't that what you're? Yeah,
That's where I was going. Yeah. because of course I'm a crazy conspiracy guy. I mean, we're going to just destroy the cameras, lose the films. Maybe there's frames out of them. Oh, these things aren't very good records at all, are they? Because after all, we can't find the originals and everything else. And gee, it sounds to me like somebody doesn't want anybody to know exactly what happened or exactly how things were filmed. I don't know. Maybe.
I try to explain to my sister and brother when they're like, "Why are you still looking for it, Gayle? We're never going to find this." Well, that's why. All of those things that you just said are the reasons why. To me, it just points to how important the film is. That's what it says to me. That it's important to find that original. And the Jones Harrises of the world and other researchers of the world go, "Gayle, it's gone. It's been destroyed." But I'm an idealist. I really am. I have hope that maybe it is still out there. I mean, maybe someone's keeping it as a souvenir. Or maybe it's like I said early at the beginning of the program, Chuck. Maybe it's in a box like Rosebud, like the sleigh from Citizen Kane. I mean, who knows?
Well, I can assure you of this. If you want my 2 cents about it, the film is not gone. It has not been shredded. It is in somebody's possession who does not want to release it or to have a problem, having a tug of war over it with you or with anybody else. It is in their possession.
Well, can I say this right now on your show?
Go ahead.
May I say this? If you are that person that Chuck is talking about, I promise, I'm saying it right here in public, I won't sue you. I won't press charges on you. Just give me the film. I promise. I won't do anything. I'm not going to pay you, but I'm not looking to make any money. I just want the film. Let us look at it and see what's out there. Let us see. And thank you, Chuck, for letting me say that.
Not a problem. I kind of had a feeling that was I was actually going to ask you, if somebody did just show up on your doorstep tomorrow and say, "Look, here's the film."
I'd probably hug them. I wouldn't be upset with them. I would hug them. I might get upset later, but right then I would hug them.
And I do hope that whoever does have it has had the sense to preserve it properly, because these things do deteriorate over time if you don't keep them at the right temperature and everything else. And I do hope that it is still salvageable and in one piece. But I believe very much that the film does still exist. I don't think anybody would have ran it through a shredder. Maybe not at this point in history, but at some point in history it could come out and be a very, very valuable thing. So I don't think anybody would want to destroy it, especially because. The motive of somebody who would get their hands on it and then hide it in the first place tells me that they would not want to see it destroyed necessarily. They may not want the information out there, but I don't think they'd want it destroyed.
Right.
And I don't think that the government-based studies, because some people would say, well, maybe the government still has it. I don't believe they do, because, I've got my reasons for not believing that they have it. Their reproductions thus far, to be honest with you, and the examples that they have put forth when they've printed materials, even stuff that was meant to be internal that I've seen that I'm not supposed to have seen, quite honestly shows me that they did not actually have the original at various points themselves. Okay, so I don't believe that it was in government hands that would have dumped it into a shredder or anything like that. I think that it was it's more likely in private hands out there. And I'll say the same thing. I would be extremely glad if this film got returned to you. I would hope that I might be able to get access to a good first generation copy. Just for my own use, not for public dissemination.
It would happen.
But just for my own study, because I do believe there's a great deal to be revealed from it, and all those dark patches, on the grassy knoll. I have this terrible nagging suspicion that we could see a great deal more. And you know what? Even if it did reveal that there is nothing there but some blowing leaves, and and the cars that are way off in the background that are in the parking lot, that's fine by me. I would just like to see that once and for all.
Me too. You got to be open-minded about it all. The way that it's been handled throughout the years leads me to believe there's something more to it. But by the same token, maybe it's like so many other things in this case, just coincidental. I don't believe that, but there's a possibility that it's just coincidental that it's missing. It's just coincidental that no one studied it in its entirety. No governmental entity studied it in its entirety. I mean, you would think all these people that had access to the original and no one ever studied it from the beginning to the end. No one. I mean, I can understand not studying the majorettes at the football game, but the assassination sequence, I don't understand that at all.
Yeah, but see, even the majority of experts who have taken a look at what they think is an early generation copy of it, and I've never talked about it on the air, but I mean, I know what goes around the rest of the film because I've seen what I think are uncut copies. And the fact is that if you try and ask some of these experts if they even saw that majorette part with the baton there briefly, they haven't. Okay. Yeah. It's very much like seeing the birthday party sequence on the Zapruder film. There's more to it, but
right.
They've never seen the whole thing. Which, and it's not like the majorette sequence has any sort of value to it. The pictures of Dealey Plaza the next day on your grandfather's film, probably not super valuable. But the point is that it would be at least proof that we're seeing the uncut version.
That's right.
So, look, we have less than 20 minutes left, and I'll tell you what, I meant to get to phone calls earlier, but I got caught up in the conversation with you, and I want to make sure, because we haven't even mentioned the name of the book, where people can get it, anything else, and we haven't taken phone calls. If somebody wants to jump in, I'd like you, after I'm done giving the phone number and stuff, to tell people where they can find your book and your website and all that, please. But 718-717-8296 if you want to call and ask Gayle a question. If you want to ask me a question, fine, but you can do that anytime. Gayle's not here all the time, so please, whatever it is, and I'll field anything, and as usual, the same rules apply. You can abuse the host, but not the guest. So that's that. That's the only way you're going to get cut off. Anything else, please add in. Also, if you're on my Skype list, I'll just drop you into the conversation, and we'll see what you have to say as well. So Gayle, if you could, please just tell us where we can get the book, the name of the book, your website, all that.
Okay. And you can see what a great marketer I am, Chuck. I didn't even talk about it. Oh, well, like I said, this was more of a labor of love in trying to find my grandfather's film than becoming a great author. But though that would be nice on down the line. I was an English professor for years. All right. The name of the book is Orville Nix, The Missing JFK Assassination Film. You can purchase it on Amazon, at Barnes & Noble, at iTunes, I believe. I'm not sure if it's up there yet. Or you can purchase a signed copy from me on my website at www.GayleNixJackson.com, and that's GayleNixJackson, one long word, .com, /books is where you'll find it. There's lots of things on my website, but if you're looking for the book, you can see it there and on the splash page. And is that all I needed to say? I said where you can find it, right?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, Nook and Kindle, and then there's softcover. If you'd rather have a softcover book, it's on Amazon, and there's hardcover books on Amazon as well as at my website.
Right, I was just going to say that it is available in the ebook version as well as in a hard copy version, and it is interesting. Kind of looks, in case you're scanning the internet, it sort of looks like a pack of Lucky Strikes.
That's what my grandfather smoked.
See, and I wanted to get that explanation out of you because I had that feeling. I knew he smoked. I was pretty sure it was Lucky Strikes, but I wanted to make sure I was right about that.
I'll give you a little piece of trivia, Chuck. The working title of this book was Lucky Strike. And my editor said, no, Gayle, you can't do that. People will think that you're insinuating killing the president was a lucky strike, which, of course, never crossed my mind. Ever, never, never. I meant Lucky Strike as in my grandfather being there. That's how I was looking at it. And so I changed it to that really long title because I didn't want to offend anyone, and it would have. I didn't look at it that way. But Lucky Strike was the working title.
Right. It was. So that was an homage, by the way,
Right.
to that. Just so everybody knows.
Right.
But anyway, so I have just finally brought up the chat room, guys, in case you guys wanted to add in and ask any questions too, because I had a little trouble with my browser, but now it's up. So if you guys have something to say, I'll look at that as well. And just don't hit me with all the Skype messages, because that makes me crazy while I'm trying to do a show.
Really crazy. I couldn't even make our mic work at the beginning. Oh my goodness, I wouldn't know what I would do.
That's going to be a great funny story too, right there. Because I sound like I'm like fumbling around trying to type to you to explain what's going on, and then of course time kicks in, and I got to announce and intro the show and explain who you are.
Did you read that message I sent you? You said, Chuck, I'm yelling at you and you're not answering. Did you see that?
Yeah, I did. But it was funny because, like I said, the first time I called you and you couldn't hear me.
Right.
No, wait, let's back this up. The first time I called you, I didn't hear you at all. There was nothing. You were hearing me.
Right.
The second time that we got you in there, I'm hearing you and you weren't hearing me. So it was just like, wow, okay, am I actually going to be able to pull this off tonight or not? But
you're thinking, wow, this lady, does she not know technology at all? This happens every single time I Skype anyone. I promise you, Chuck. I'm so clueless. I don't know how. And I do believe it's because maybe my kids sometimes Skype and push different buttons than I do. I don't know. But I figured it out now. I think I know it. So maybe you'll be the last one that I have to harass this way. I'm so sorry. I'm sorry.
Listen, it's not a problem, and I'll tell you the truth. There was a bunch of stuff that I didn't get to cover, with this show with you, and I would love to do another one.
Oh, that's so sweet, Chuck. Thank you. I know.
No, you don't. Not at all. I'm really thrilled, and we kind of killed 2 hours really easily, and didn't even need the phone callers or anything. Because we're down to like the last 10 minutes or so here. And, another thing I just want to get to really quickly is, of course, it's this year that you sort of made an appearance and did speak to a few people at some conferences and things, right?
I did.
And I have stayed out of that fray, I'll tell you.
I will from now on.
Oh, okay, so... So you've sort of learned your lesson.
Well, I tend to just speak whatever's on my mind. But I've always done that, Chuck. I mean, I don't think there's a need to, I don't know, embellish. I don't think there's a need to polish. Well, polish is good. I just say whatever I think, and I know that there's a place for conferences. Let me just get it out there. There is a place for it. There are older people and younger ones too that I saw at some of these conferences who I know had a great time. And to be quite honest, I really did. I mean, I had a great time there. But me, I just want more. I want us to educate more. I want kids, my kids that are my kids' ages, 18 and 15, to say, wait a minute. You mean I'm hearing all this on the news about things going on, and this stuff has been going on since '63? I mean, I want to inspire. I want to educate. I want people to debate civilly. I don't like the name calling. I don't like the backstabbing. I don't like any of that stuff. And I'm not much for confrontation, unless of course it's with UPI and saying they don't have my film. But anyway, I have been pretty confrontational with those guys there. But what I'm trying to tell you is, I think that we can do more. I think that there should be, here's my idea. I think that we should gather together some of the more level-headed people who aren't all about ego, who don't have agendas, which everybody's got one, but I mean, mine is to find my grandfather's film, and develop some sort of treatise, some sort of constitution that says, okay, we are conspiracy realists. We all agree these things happened. and then take it from there and get past the minutia. Get past the bickering that doesn't really matter and doesn't add to finding out why this happened, how it happened, because we know it happened. Yeah, you know?
Yeah, I understand completely, and believe it or not, that idea has been exactly brought up several times, that we need to basically create sort of a constitution for this stuff and
Right.
And begin to actually gather the evidence. Of course, one of the big pieces of evidence would be the photographic material, which is now missing. Of course, not only is the Nix film missing, but there's a lot of original stuff missing.
Oh, yeah.
You know, just in case people don't know. You know, some things were taken as souvenirs, etc. Some things resurfaced in odd hands later on, and all that stuff. But
On eBay every now and then. Oh, that just kills me.
oh yeah, that is a funny thing. It does appear on eBay once in a while. You'll see something where somebody says, you know, well, I happen to have this, and you know, you never know exactly what you're getting. There was a big hullabaloo about 3 years ago over something that was ostensibly one of the original Zapruder copies. That was offered on eBay and immediately taken down because a private person basically, you know, didn't do a buy it now, but contacted the individual and asked them to do a private sale.
Oh, my.
That happened not too long ago because this person said they had, you know, the original copy, which is a weird thing in and of itself, because that's a whole other show, folks. But the Nix film is a very, very strange story, and we only basically scratched the surface of it tonight.
Right.
And that's why I kind of jumped through history with you, because I wanted to kind of get it all down in one spot. And I want to say thanks for coming on, and I'll tell you, I could definitely do this again, and would love to hear, you know, a lot more about your grandfather, actually, because, you know, I know we're running low on time, and like there's only about 7 minutes left here, but the bottom line is that I don't really like, and I don't know if you've run across this yet, but the discussions about you know, your grandfather's possible involvements in things.
Yes.
You know, he was a Mason, and he was part of this lodge, and he was that, and all these things. I mean, I don't know if you want to try to sort of just have something to say about that toward the end here.
My grandfather was not a Mason. Again, my grandfather had a 4th grade education. He was a good dad. He was a most wonderful grandfather. He was a good husband, though he did have an eye for the ladies, I'll be honest. Not that he messed around. I didn't mean that. It's just that he was very charismatic. I remember women coming to my grandmother's door going, oh, here's you a fruitcake for Christmas, and could you make sure Orville has some, and, you know, those kind of things. And I thought that odd even as a child, but my grandmother didn't care. And he loved. He truly was a semi-pro golfer. He was that good. That's how much time he spent at it. And at River Lakes Country Club, which is no longer there. And he didn't take advantage of his relationship with Forrest Sorrells. You know, he probably could have, but he didn't, because he respected their friendship so. And it made him feel maybe a little bit more important than what he was, because like I told you, he truly had esteem issues, you know, about his education, about his background. He had to quit school to pick cotton because his older brother had epilepsy, and then he had a couple of sisters, and to feed the family, he had to quit school to pick cotton so they'd have food on their table, you know?
Well, my impressions of the guy were this, that he was just a regular guy who just happened to, and that lucky strike idea is that he was just by happenstance there. You know, he was definitely seemingly, any stories I've ever heard about him from others is that he was just a likable kind of guy, very much to himself and about his family. And the golf thing I've heard about, but I wasn't aware that he was actually at the same place as Sorrells was, and all of that. That's. I mean, I knew he was friendly with Sorrells, and that's part of the, you know, the whole, well, he was involved or whatever treatise out there. But it's absolute nonsense as far as I'm concerned, and it seems as though you're telling me I'm right.
That's right. I mean, he asked, he told my grandmother, he said, I wonder if Forrest knows more than what he's telling me because he seems a little agitated. Yeah, from time to time. I mean, he wouldn't even ask him. He did not want to lose his government job, and he did not want to get involved with politics or get involved with anything that would cause him any issues. So, like I said, when he started getting those phone calls saying, were you a part of this? And you better quit talking about this. And let me just say, this was never from the voice that would call. Sometimes it was a female. Sometimes it was a male. Sometimes it would have an accent. And sometimes it wouldn't. And we all just chalked it up to just wacko people, because his number was in the phone book. But after that, he got an unlisted number, which, as you well know, would be very expensive to do in the late 60s and early 70s,
Yeah, I can't remember if it was 65 or 67 that his name disappeared from the... Yeah, it's somewhere in there. He actually had to get himself an unlisted number, but I do know that from examining the phone books. You don't know the nonsense I've had to go through to track things down and to figure things out.
I know. That's kind of fun that you could read those phone books and they'd tell you everything. They'd tell you how many kids were in the family and who they were and everything. Those old phone books,
Yeah, they sure did. Unknown phone caller, I can't add you in, so you gotta actually show your number in order to be added in. And I would definitely put you on for the last couple of minutes with Gayle here, but you gotta not be a blocked number. I'm sorry, just so we know there. And sorry about that, Gayle, but if I go to answer that, it'll cut you off, and I'm not doing that with the last couple of minutes of the show.
Yeah, I may never push the right button and get back on.
Or you won't hear me, or I won't hear you, or something. And that's all right, though. But again, I can't thank you enough, and I'm really grateful that that you're telling this story because it needed to be told. And I think conspiratorial thought is something that I definitely involve myself in, but I don't like dragging people that don't belong in the discussion into it. And Orville Nix does not belong in the conspiracy discussion. Where he does belong is that he was a witness to history. Definitely had his own viewpoints about what he saw, what he did not see, what he heard, what he did not hear, and that is one of the things that is going to be preserved by your book and by what you're doing. So at the very least, even if the film is not discovered again in your lifetime, which I really hope that is not the case, by the way, I really want to see this thing come out. I really want to see this thing back in your hands, and I want to see a copy of it personally. But all of that needs to be put aside because after all, this was just a regular guy who just happened to be in the right place at the right time, and that's all there is to it. So that's what I have to say about it. And like I said, we're down to just the last couple of minutes, so I don't know if there's anything you want to get in there. Gayle Nix Jackson, all one word.com, and you can get the book from there, a signed copy, or you can find it on Amazon and a bunch of other places. Definitely, I suggest that you go and get it. Like I said again, if you don't recognize it right away, the cover sort of looks like a pack of Lucky Strikes with the red circle in the middle there and the white background. So I don't know if there's anything you want to put out there as the last word here, but go right ahead.
This was quite enjoyable, and it is. You don't even know that you taught me things on this show that I didn't know, and that you knew those things about 75 and Goodnight America. It just brought back a flood of memories to me, and I want to thank you for those things. I just want to thank you for the whole interview, Chuck. It was great. You are very well versed in all of this. My goodness, I wish I had talked to you when I was writing the book.
Well, a couple of authors have done that, and that's another story.
Yeah, I wish I'd been one.
Listen, if you decide to do a second part, let me know, or you decide to update it. I'll be more than happy to lend you any assistance I can.
Thank you so much.
Because again, I think that Orville Nix story should be told as it is, and the film should be back in your hands. And eventually, eventually made available to those who still care about the truth regarding the assassination, because I think a great deal is left to be revealed in your grandfather's film. And again, I can't thank you enough for your efforts in getting the story out there. It's one thing for me in my 40s to do this, but it is yet another thing when the granddaughter of the man who did it is telling you the same story. Thank you, everybody, for listening. The Ochelli Effect is done. Have a good night, everybody. See you in a minute, Kim.
At the age of 19 in 1962, she was
But I have the files. You know, I read this stuff at the National Archives, and I read these other things.
I said to myself,
how can that be possible? You know, wrestles and fondle slap of choice, I don't know, computers, internet, professional wrestlers, and not just Ventura style. It doesn't matter whether it's cartoon they from as long as it's real. It's hard to get real these days, because seriously, they don't want you to have degrees.